We've brought Jimmy here today, Welsh Section A show pony, because we're a bit worried about him. He's been footsy throughout the season. He's just come out of the winter looking very well and still very footsy. We're worried about him having laminitis, so we've just brought him here to get him checked out.
Right, well, good morning, Jimmy. Let's have a little look at you. Actually, the good thing is that he's actually looking in himself quite bright, which I'm quite pleased to say. I mean, it's one of the things is that sometimes if they're in a really bad state, they start to withdraw in themselves and you can see pain and stuff. He's actually a good thing. So first and foremost, thank you for bringing him in so quickly. It's one of my little bugbears is that laminitis is an emergency condition and should always be treated as such. So far better to come in with a few niggles than to leave it a few days because it will only deteriorate. So good on that. But yes, in himself looking good. If I could just nag you a little bit, we have got a bit of a crest, and I think this is what you were talking about with your saying he's come through the winter with still a bit of condition on him. The crest here is always a good barometer. You can see I can actually move that. When they're really overweight, this becomes very turgid and rigid. And you can see we've still got a little bit of fat here. So for an animal that's come through the winter months, he's still carrying a little bit of weight here. But overall, yeah, we're looking good. Let's have a little look at these feet now, shall we? First things that strike me about this foot is that we have got some distortions are evident, and this is a fairly typical sort of pony laminitic foot. This is low grade, I'm delighted to say, so that's excellent. But nonetheless, my first concern is when I look at this frog, you can see how shaggy that is. It's not weight bearing at all, which is why we've got this deep central cleft. And then when I look at each of the heel terminations, here and here, you can see how much they've migrated forward. And they're tall. You can see how tall they are, this distance here and to here. So because they've grown tall, this is no longer in effect. So what I think we'll do is, again, we'll address, if there's my white line, I'm just going to draw in there. It's not making a very good line, but nonetheless. So that's the junction of wall and sole. And you can see that stretch and that flare that's developed. So I'd like to deal with that because, again, if you've got an edge here, a flare or distortion, you're getting leverage forces here, and that's a bit like me peeling back your fingernail. And again, this is why you must treat it as an emergency condition, because you can imagine the pain of somebody taking your fingernail and peeling it back. And of course, this tiny little mechanical advantage doesn't help that. You can see too, we've got a good concavity to the sole, which is excellent. Some of them where they've started to sink and so on, then you can see that the pedal bone starts to press down on here, and this gets very, very sore through here. Now in this case we're lucky because he's maintained that concavity of the sole so that he's not getting any pain response here and here. But if I can just reach for some hoof testers, please. And this is just a little mechanical pinch or squeeze, because what I'm looking for is a pain response. Yeah, just over, because if the pedal bone sits in here, and if that's descended at all, then you're going to get a pain response against that sole. Right, if we just have a look at this foot from the outside here, what I'm concerned about, when we looked at the reverse, you saw that flare on the foot. You can see that this is here now, and in fact, if you trace down, this is nice and tight at the top, but then we've got flares and distortions from about this point, and this is where they start to lever away. And also, I think there's a significance. Can you see there are sort of striations here? There are lines emanate. And if you look at those, they are divergent. And because they're divergent, it means that I've got a differential. I've got far more heel growth here than I have here at the toe. This is all being compacted, so we're slamming down onto that toe the whole time. And at the back here, because it's far more divergent, we're jacking him up the whole time. So what I think is interesting is if you look at this right foot, again, you can see this divergence on the growth rings. And I think what's also significant, you can see this level of bruising. There is actually bruising in all 4 feet, but that's a particularly fine example. So you can see that you're losing that laminal bond. And you can see now clearly on this foot how that you've got this divergence at the heels, and then you've got this compression where this is all shunted at the front with this flare and distortion just on this bottom end. But that does show quite nicely, as I say, that divergence of the growth rings.